maybe when Barack Hussein Obama was studying law at Harvard, he never read the 1854 report of the House Judiciary Committee, which had been given the task of determining whether America was a Christian nation. Here's what they wrote. I quote, "Had the Founding Fathers during the Revolution a suspicion that any attempt to war against Christianity, that revolution would have been strangled in its cradle. At the time of the adoption of the Constitution and its amendments, the universal sentiment was that Christianity should be encouraged. In this age, there is no substitute for Christianity. That was the religion of the founders of the Republic, and they expected it to remain the religion of their descendants." Now, that's what the House Judiciary Committee ruled or decided in 1854. Maybe Mr. Obama and his comrades are unaware that Mr. Wall of Separation, Thomas Jefferson, when he was president, attended church services every Sunday held in, guess where? The U.S. Capitol building. They probably just would simply be appalled and faint to learn that he even enlisted the Marine Band to provide the music, all at government expense, I might add. You see, they are probably unaware that Thomas Jefferson said things like this: "The Christian religion is the best religion that has been given to man, and I, as chief magistrate of this nation, am bound to give it the sanction of my example." Now, friends, I'm not trying to make you Christians. I'm just trying to tell you this is what our founders said. We need to re-educate our culture. We need to re-educate our citizenry. Now, there is a second thing that I believe we have to do. We must raise a regiment that will make our neighbors aware of the hypocrisy of the liberals now running our government. Now, we can do this by pointing out certain things. For instance, we can point out that President Obama promised to rid the government of lobbyists and then filled his administration with them. That he promised to end earmarks, and he's now explaining why some earmarks are good. That he promised not to sign a bill filled with pork, only to pass off more pork on America than Jimmy Dean sausage. He promised to put the health care debate on C-SPAN. You've already seen that, and the bill would be on the internet for 72 hours. Instead, health care has been cut in backroom deals where conservatives have been completely cut out of the process. Congress has passed the bill. It hasn't even been written yet. How do you do that? This Thursday, President Obama had the audacity to say, and I quote, now is not a time for partisanship, but for citizenship. I say, how about a little bipartisanship and respecting the opinions of the citizenship and kill health care, Mr. Obama? That's what I say. You see, we have to remind our neighbors that rather than call the war on terror what it actually is, a war, the Obama administration insists on calling it an overseas contingency or a man-made disaster. They do this even while terrorist attacks continue, such as the panty bomber on Christmas Day. Now, let me tell you, had that been a white male who happened to claim to be a conservative or a Christian, they would have hanged him from the nearest tree. But you see, we're not going to do that here because we can't profile. Then this Thursday, responding to that attack, President Obama was finally forced to admit that we are at war with Al-Qaeda. In response to Obama's comment, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters said this: "If we're at war with Al-Qaeda, then why in the world are we trying them in civilian courts?" And I'm telling you, that is a great question. We can point out to our neighbors that while Obama claims to believe in our Republican form of government, he has appointed czar after czar who have unchecked power and answer only to him. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't our forefathers fight and die to free us from the rule of monarchs, dictators, and czars? I mean, I thought that's what America was all about. Obama has appointed so many czars that even Lenin and Stalin would be envious. Most of these czars are leftist liberals and self-avowed socialist Marxists. Here are a few. You probably know about them, but here are a few of Obama's appointments since he became president. Green job czar Van Jones, self-avowed communist. Radio czar Mark Lloyd, a fan of communist Hugo Chavez. Lloyd believes conservative radio should be silenced. White House Communications Director Anita Dunn says that the murdering tyrant Mao Zedong is one of her favorite philosophers. Manufacturing czar Ron Bloom, also a Mao fan, says that power comes largely from the barrel of a gun. Regulation czar Cass Sunstein believes animals should be assigned legal representation and be allowed to sue their owners. I would assume they'd use sign language. And then you have Safe Schools czar Kevin Jennings, a homosexual activist and founder of GLSEN, a group committed to the queering of our public schools. Now, those are his appointments. Now, that, friends, is a problem. Even in Russia, the land of the czars, they know this doesn't work. The following excerpts come from an article that appeared in a Russian newspaper recently. Let me read it to you. The American descent into Marxism is happening with breathtaking speed against the backdrop of a passive, hapless sheeple. We Russians would not roll over and give up our freedoms and our souls. Americans know more about their favorite TV dramas than the drama in D.C. They care more for their right to choke down a McDonald's burger than for their constitutional rights. Their churches are, for the most part, little more than Sunday circuses. Then came Obama's command that GM's president step down from the leadership of his company. That's right. The American president now has the power, the self-given power, to fire CEOs. Prime Minister Putin warned Obama. Now, this is in a Russian newspaper. Prime Minister Putin warned Obama not to follow the path to Marxism because it only leads to disaster. Americans have taken this with barely a whimper. The proud American will go down into his slavery without a fight, beating his chest and proclaiming how free he really is, and the world will only snicker. Well, I've got news for those Russians. Here's one American who has no intention of going down into slavery without a fight, my friend. What about you? Now, see, our neighbors have to be reminded of these kinds of things. There's a third thing, very quickly, I've got to move. There's a third thing that we must do. We must get our own personal houses in order. Benjamin Franklin once said, "Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters." I believe, friends, we are getting the kind of government we deserve. We have become mentally, physically soft and spiritually decadent. For far too long, we've sat by, gotten fat, and self-absorbed, leaving the safekeeping of our liberties to professional politicians. We must give our own houses a moral and spiritual cleansing before we can attempt a cleanup of the White House. After we've done this, then we can raise a regiment, go to Washington, take names, and clean house. How about that? That's what we can do. Now, there's one last thing that we have to do. We must do this. These are marching orders here. We must take off the gloves, stop worrying about who we're going to offend, and do what we must do to save this nation. We can no longer be afraid of offending people. Samuel Adams, 1780, said this, "If ever a time should come when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin." My friends, that time is now. America needs its patriots to stand up now. Our country is under attack, not from a foreign enemy, but a domestic one. We can no longer afford to stay home and leave the fighting to someone else. We must crawl out of our bunkers, out of our foxholes, get in the fight, and vote these liberals out of office before we lose it all.